They said the class photo was missing that year. The seniors of Spring Willow High, 1992 edition, had no explanation for it, just a blank page where 10 names should have been, 10 students, 10 empty chairs on a camping trip no one likes to talk about, not even now over 30 years later, and yet somehow, in a dusty old closet behind the school auditorium, I found a sealed box marked faculty only, taped up with a yellowed caution slip, and inside was a pristine copy of the 1992 yearbook. Untouched, pages crisp, and right there between S and T was a full-page glossy photo of the missing 10, all smiling, all looking straight ahead, all wearing the same camp jackets from the day they vanished, and under the photo was the line "We made it, we're just ahead," which made no sense, not in any logical way, because those kids never made it back from that trip. Their tents were found slashed from the inside, their backpacks untouched, food still cooking on the fire, and the radio left playing static as if someone had ripped out the frequency knob. The story was always a strange stain on our town's history, an incident talked about only in rumors and whispers. Some say they ran away, others say there was a sinkhole or a bear attack, but nothing was ever proven, and no remains were found, just a trail that ended in the clearing, clean and sudden like it had been erased, like they'd been plucked out of reality itself. I was just a freshman then, didn't know them personally. But I remember how weird the teachers got, how that week's assemblies were all cancelled, how the principal had a breakdown and never returned, and how the next year's graduating class quietly agreed to never print a full yearbook again. But now, with this strange 1992 copy in my hands, I feel something shift, like the story isn't over, like someone, or something, wants it told again. I flip through the pages and see odd things, like photos that don't line up with known students, faces that don't quite match the roster, captions that read things like "still listening" and "return scheduled," and then I notice the signatures on the inside cover, 10 of them, each one scrawled with a black pen that hasn't faded, and beside them, a small symbol I don't recognize, a spiral crossed by a line. I take the book home, lay it flat, scan every detail, and in the middle of the group photo behind one of the students, Tracy Lynn, who was student council vice president, there's a reflection in the window of the camp lodge, a faint outline of someone watching, someone tall with long arms and a white shirt with no face, just blur, and behind them, what looks like a chalkboard, like a classroom, except the forest is outside that window, not a school. So how could that be? I call my cousin Dana, whose brother Jeremy was one of the 10, and when I mention the photo she goes dead silent, then whispers, "I dreamed of that picture last night." But the faces weren't right, they kept changing, she tells me. She never got closure, that her mom still keeps Jeremy's room untouched, like he's going to walk through the door any day now, and lately, she says, the clock in that room has been ticking again even though it's been broken for decades. I go back to school the next day, find the janitor, ask about the yearbook, and he just shakes his head and says, "They tried to bury it, but things like that don't stay buried, kid." Then he slips me a folded note and walks away. Inside is a hand-drawn map of the campgrounds with one section circled in red, Old Fire Tower, a place that was supposedly demolished in 1989 but apparently still stands, so I decide to go, not alone though. Dana insists on coming. We pack flashlights, old records, printed maps, and on a foggy Saturday morning, we make the 2-hour drive into the woods. It's colder than expected, too quiet, the usual trail feels wrong. Like it loops too fast, and just when I think we're lost, we spot it. The base of the old fire tower, rusted, swallowed by moss but unmistakable, and leaning against its bottom rung is a camp jacket, sun-faded, but the name tag reads Jeremy. Dana breaks down, drops to her knees, whispers his name like a prayer, and then the wind kicks up and a sound echoes out from the tower's top, something between a radio transmission and humming. I call up but there's no answer, just the static growing louder, and a voice, or something like a voice, saying, "We're not gone. We're just paused," and as I look down, the trees around us seem to bend inward, like they're closing the path behind us, and at that moment, I know we've started something, triggered a story that doesn't want to stay hidden, because when we leave and get back to the car, the yearbook is gone from my backpack, but in its place is a single Polaroid photo, fresh and glossy, showing Dana and me standing at the tower with someone else behind us. Tall, blurred, arms too long, and a chalkboard nailed to the tree behind him reading, "Class of 92, attendance mandatory." If this story gripped you from the start, make sure to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe for the next parts. It only gets deeper from here. The trail wound deeper than either of them expected, the trees shifting strangely as if the forest didn't want to be mapped, and after only 20 minutes, their phones lost signal entirely. Dana muttered that this wasn't where the original camp path had led. She remembered a wooden marker near the ridge, but there was nothing now, just moss-eaten rocks and oddly smooth stones half buried in the dirt like teeth. The narrator glanced at her, then back at the underbrush. asking if she remembered where the cabins were, but Dana hesitated, then pointed through a thicker patch of trees, her voice low, saying there used to be a fire pit there and one of the boys carved names into the rocks, and as they approached, the air seemed to still, the usual forest sounds, birds, insects, wind had gone silent, and then they saw it, a ring of blackened stones, untouched for decades, and sure enough, the names were still there, 10 of them, scrawled in different handwriting, but there was a new name carved underneath them, deeper, angrier, Will. Dana's breath caught, and the narrator asked who that was. But she didn't answer right away, just stared at the carving with wide, sunken eyes, saying Will was one of the kids who wasn't supposed to be there, a boy who snuck into the trip the night before it left. Some said he didn't even go to the school, others said he was the counselor's cousin, and no one really knew, except that he was there the night they vanished, and his name never made it into the original records. Not even on the missing posters. It was like everyone just erased him, and suddenly the air smelled like something burning, not smoke but hot iron, and the narrator turned, flashlight shaking, and caught movement behind the trees, something large, tall, gone before the beam caught it fully, and Dana whispered that they should keep going, past the clearing, past what she called the edge, and when he asked what that meant, she said it used to be a place where the camp ended and something else began, and she wasn't sure if it was a boundary or a gate, but they never crossed it as kids, and she wasn't even sure it had been visible back then, but as they moved forward, something changed in the trees, the bark darkened, the ground grew softer, not muddy but spongy, like something old was buried beneath, and up ahead stood a wooden archway, rotted almost entirely but still upright, with an old carved sign swinging gently in windless air. It said Spring Willow Echo Trail. And Dana said that didn't exist on any old map, not even in camp blueprints. And when they stepped beneath it, both of them felt it, like crossing through silk underwater, and their ears popped slightly, then silence returned, deeper than before, but now filled with tension, like the forest was holding its breath, and after 10 minutes walking the trail, they saw the cabin, alone and slightly sunken into the earth, its windows broken, door ajar, with moss-covered furniture still barely visible inside. Dana stopped in her tracks, because the porch still had Jeremy's old flashlight on it. She whispered, "It's his," and picked it up with trembling hands, and when she pressed the button, it flickered on, battery still intact after 30 years, impossible, and inside the cabin, the narrator found something even more surreal, photos, actual printed photos pinned to a corkboard inside, curled and yellowed, showing the 10 missing kids inside the same cabin, laughing, cooking, reading, like they'd lived there longer than just one night, and one photo was different. Taken from behind the glass, the kids sleeping, and outside the window stood a tall, dark shape watching them, and it was dated 2 weeks after the disappearance. Dana backed out slowly, whispering that she needed air, and outside she found fresh footprints in the dirt, barefoot, small, circling the cabin over and over again, and suddenly they both heard it, a slow humming like a lullaby, coming from the woods behind the cabin, and a shadow passed across the broken window, not fast, not darting, but slow, deliberate, and then the intercom from the cabin, still mounted on the wall, crackled once and played a short, staticky recording. "We were here, we are still here," and then it stopped. Dana dropped the flashlight and whispered that they had to go now, but the trail behind them no longer looked the same. The trees were closer together, denser, and the carved gate behind them was gone, replaced by another structure, an old rusted school bus half submerged into the earth, twisted at one end, its windows fogged from inside, and the narrator, despite every instinct, stepped closer, because a handprint had just appeared on the inside of the fogged glass, small like a student's, and it was writing something backward. "We're in the pages," and Dana grabbed his arm, dragging him back, yelling that this wasn't the only place, that the camp had split somehow, like a mirror cracked into pieces, and each one held a part of them, of what happened, and that yearbook wasn't just a memory, it was a gate, and now that they'd opened it, it wouldn't close again. The intercom crackled one last time behind them and whispered, "Next page coming." Climbing into the half-sunken school bus felt like entering the belly of something long dead. The steps groaned under Dana's weight as she pulled herself up first, her flashlight barely illuminating the decaying interior, vines curling through shattered windows like fingers reaching in. The floor sloped at an awkward angle, the back of the bus almost swallowed by earth and roots. I followed, gripping the cold metal rail, every breath tasting of mildew and something sweetly rotten, seats torn open like gutted torsos, stuffing hanging out in gory tangles. But then we saw them. Drawings, hundreds of them, taped or pinned or carved right into the metal, each one childlike but disturbing, the same 10 faces repeated over and over, some smiling too wide, others with hollow eyes, and always surrounded by woods. Some of the pages were stuck together with what looked like dried sap or blood. Dana reached for one, her hand trembling. It was a crayon sketch showing a cave entrance, a spiral. Drawn above it, and all 10 kids holding hands in a circle around a jack-o'-lantern. But instead of fire, the carved mouth and eyes showed screaming faces inside. She flipped it over and gasped. A name scribbled in the same handwriting as the carvings outside. "Will, stop lying." Beneath it, smaller letters. "They'll never forgive you." Dana looked back at me, pale, lips trembling. "I think they're trying to tell us what happened," she whispered. And suddenly the bus made a deep, groaning creak, like it shifted an inch into the earth. We scrambled out, stumbling into the thick underbrush. But as we did, I caught a reflection in the last bus window. 10 faces staring from inside, faint, pale. Unmoving, but unmistakably there. We didn't speak until we reached the road again, our breaths ragged, night falling fast, headlights barely touching the tree line as we sped away. Back at my apartment we laid everything out. Photos, the sketchbook, the pages we tore down, the GPS mark near Spring Willow Creek, and the strangest thing was, the more we looked at the drawings, the more they seemed to change, as if the ink adjusted when we weren't watching, small details shifting. A tree branch turned into a hand. A face looking toward us instead of away. We locked everything in a box and left it under my bed, tried to sleep, but around 3 a.m. the intercom buzzer from the apartment entrance rang once, then stopped, then again, 5 long presses, 1 short, just like how the kids marked attendance in our old school days. My heart pounded. Dana sat upright on the couch, her face pale, eyes wet. "You heard that, right?" she asked, and I nodded slowly. Reaching for the hallway camera on my phone, it showed nothing, just empty steps and rain, but in the lower corner, blurry and small, was what looked like a boot print, soaked and faint but undeniably familiar. The tread matched the very shoes I buried in 1991 with my best friend after his sudden transfer. A story the school pushed when Will never came back. We were told he moved to Ohio with his aunt, but I never believed it, and now that same print was at my door by morning. Dana found her windshield shattered from inside the car, the rearview mirror lying on the passenger seat, and on the mirror, written in something thick and brown, the words, "They never left, we didn't report it, we knew better." By now the story wasn't just about memory, it was pulling us back, as if we'd never truly left that forest. We had to go back, had to see what was inside that cave from the sketch. So we gathered supplies, night vision cameras, voice recorders, a second flashlight each, and a spare battery pack. And we drove to Spring Willow Creek under a full moon, the air unusually warm for fall, heavy with something that made the hairs on my arms rise. When we arrived, everything was wrong. The path we had used before was overgrown like decades had passed overnight, and the signpost was cracked in half, leaning like it had been struck by lightning. Dana hesitated, her fingers brushing against her neck. "Do you hear it?" she asked. I listened, and beneath the rustling leaves and distant frogs, I heard something, notes faint and rhythmic, almost like a recorder or flute, the same melody from the talent show in '91, the last night before they vanished. When the 10 of them performed a piece together, we pushed deeper into the woods, following the sound, and came upon a clearing where the trees seemed to bend inward like ribs, and there in the center stood the stone spiral, just like in the sketch, etched into the dirt, charred and still smoking despite no fire nearby. Dana gasped and pointed to the edge. 10 small backpacks, all faded and mold-covered, arranged in a semicircle around a hollow stump, and inside that stump, a spiral staircase made of root and stone descending into the earth. We exchanged one look and descended, step by step, the melody growing louder, not in sound, but in memory. The deeper we went, the more our heads swam, old thoughts resurfaced, images of those missing faces flickered behind our eyes, until we reached a chamber lit by phosphorescent moss, and across the walls were dozens of yearbook pages, real ones printed and glossy, all with one similarity. The same 10 names under every class, repeated through every year since 1991, and always with the same group photo, 10 kids, standing in the same pose, but subtly aged each year. It was like time kept them alive inside this place, looping their faces into records that no one questioned. And in the center of the chamber on a stone pedestal was a new yearbook, dated for next year, 2026, the ink still drying on its cover, and on page 7 beneath in memoriam, were my name and Dana's, our photos added to the 10, smiling wide, eyes just slightly off. The moss light flickered, and we heard footsteps above, soft and barefoot, getting closer. Claire didn't sleep after they found the spiral clearing, neither did Mason, and the silence between them on the drive back wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the kind that hummed with unfinished sentences, with things left unsaid because speaking them out loud would make them too real, too irreversible, the kind of silence that lives between horror and understanding. They arrived back at the apartment just after 3 a.m., and when Claire unlocked the door, her hands were trembling not because of the cold, but because every instinct told her that once she stepped inside, things would no longer be linear. The air inside was still, but the TV was on, crackling white static, which neither of them remembered leaving on, and on the coffee table was a single object that hadn't been there before, a yearbook, the same one from earlier, but open to a new page, a photo of the 10 missing kids smiling in black and white, but someone had redrawn them in ink older, with hollowed-out eyes and expressions that didn't belong to high schoolers. Behind each figure, an identical tall man stood in the shadows, barely visible unless you looked closely, and written across the top margin in messy, almost childlike handwriting were the words, "We got older but not by choice." Mason swore and slammed the book shut, pacing now, saying this couldn't be possible, but Claire whispered that it was more than possible. It was intentional, orchestrated, not by one person but by something watching for decades, and just then the intercom from the front door buzzed, and when Mason answered it, no one spoke, just breathing heavy and deliberate, then a low voice said, "You saw the spiral, didn't you?" And then silence, but the buzzer kept humming like it didn't want to let go, and Claire grabbed her notebook and began drawing, from memory, the layout of the clearing, the shape of the trees, the burn marks. And when she showed it to Mason, he stared at it blankly before pulling out his old map again, the one from 1991, and pointed at a small patch labeled as property closed by state order, a place that was once part of the original hiking trail but was erased from later versions, and now matched exactly with Claire's sketch, and they knew they had to go back, not to revisit, but to find the route. So at dawn, they packed water, lights, the tape recorder, and a copy of the yearbook and set off again, this time on foot, not trusting roads, using only the forest for cover, and the deeper they went, the more unnatural it became. The trees here bent toward them, like they remembered faces, and the birds no longer chirped. The only sound was the crunch of leaves underfoot and occasional whispers that didn't echo. And around noon they found an old campsite buried under moss and fallen branches, the remnants of a fire pit, half a rusted flashlight, and most chilling, a carved wooden badge with a name, Jeremy, scorched across it, one of the 10 kids. Claire picked it up and immediately felt something shift in the air like pressure dropping, and suddenly Mason gasped, pointing to a tree that had fresh carvings in it, despite the age of everything else, a series of dates, May 17, 1991, then May 17, 1992, then every year after that, all scratched by the same hand, leading all the way to the current year, and under the last date. They forget until it returns, and as if triggered by their discovery, the wind turned sharp and began howling through the trees, carrying with it a sound that made no sense at all. Children reciting names over and over, like a roll call, some names matching those in the yearbook, others new, and then silence, but not complete silence. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring with pressure, and from the brush ahead, a faint light flickered yellow, artificial, and they followed it, stepping over roots and fallen logs, until they reached a metal door embedded in a rock face, half buried, rusted shut, with a small window smeared in dirt and ink, and behind that glass, for just a second, Claire saw a face, a child's face, but older than it should have been, watching them with wide, knowing eyes, and then it disappeared, and the door began to creak slowly against the wind, opening not toward them but inward, as if inviting them into whatever waited inside. Claire didn't sleep that night, not after what she and Mason saw inside the metal door buried in the woods, not after the glass panel blinked with movement and the child's face, pale, wide-eyed, motionless, vanished into blackness like it had never been there, like it had only existed in some cruel echo of time. They'd backed away slowly, Mason whispering we're not alone over and over, his flashlight stuttering with static each time they stepped too close to the stone wall, like the very ground beneath them rejected what they were trying to find. So they spent the night parked on a hilltop, watching the valley below where the metal door lay like a wound in the forest skin, Claire flipping through the recovered sketchbook from the pit, each page more frantic than the last, drawings of the same 10 kids, faces slightly changed, smiling less, then not at all, then wide-eyed and screaming behind black bars, with captions written in childish handwriting, Day 12, no morning, Day 43, the forest talks, Day 100. They are replacing us, each entry time-stamped in a loop, 1991 over and over, and Claire felt her breath catch when she turned to the last page and saw her own face drawn there, not from high school, but now, exactly as she looked at this moment, next to a caption that simply read, She came back. It begins again, she dropped the sketchbook, trembling, Mason staring silently at the words like they'd been branded into his brain, then whispered, We have to find the source, the original camp map, and Claire nodded, remembering the dusty old yearbook office still sealed at the high school, untouched since the early 2000s, so by morning they were back there, breaking into the shuttered admin building where dust hung like fog and the floorboards moaned under their steps, and in a locked drawer under layers of yellowing files they found it, an original 1991 campsite blueprint drawn by hand by the trip organizer, marked with a curious X beyond the official boundaries and labeled Echo Rock, do not enter. And as they traced the line from the cabins to that forbidden corner of the forest, a shiver ran down Claire's spine because the angle matched exactly where they'd found the metal door. But it didn't end there. The map included a series of arrows pointing underground toward something labeled Sublevel Access Hatch 4B, and scribbled beside it in blue ink were the words, "Activate only if all 10 align." And that's when Claire remembered the last page of the yearbook, the one with the students' names circled in red, 10 of them, none of whom should have been there, names from a class that vanished, now suddenly printed as if they'd been part of graduation. And in that moment Mason said something she hadn't dared to consider. What if they never left because no one let them? And Claire said nothing. Only stared at the name at the bottom of the list, her own brother's, and under it, faint and almost erased, a sentence that chilled her to her bones. They are still watching. So they packed up fast and made for Echo Rock, following the narrow, overgrown trail beyond the old fire ring where the forest thinned unnaturally. The trees bent backward like something had forced them open, and as they reached the edge of a deep ravine, the ground opened up, not with an earthquake, but with a sigh, like something welcoming them home, and there, half buried in leaves and covered in strange black vines, was Hatch 4B, metal locked, humming faintly beneath their feet. Mason knelt beside it and listened, eyes wide, then whispered, "Voices, Claire. It's them," and Claire leaned in too, her hand trembling as she touched the cold steel, and she heard it, a child's voice, muffled, distant, calling out through layers of time and earth and darkness. "Help us." It's almost reset, and the forest went still. As if holding its breath, Claire's hands shook as she pressed her ear against the sealed hatch marked 4B, her breath caught between dread and urgency, the low hum beneath it not mechanical, but biological, almost like the deep heartbeat of something living, something waiting. Mason glanced back at the woods, flashlight quivering as he whispered, "We opened this, and it's not just about the kids anymore, is it?" But Claire was already turning the rusted wheel, and as the hatch groaned open with a stench of copper and mold rising up, a gust of warm air surged out like breath from a buried lung. Inside was a spiral staircase made of stone, carved with etchings of faces, 10 of them, kids with wide eyes and hollow mouths, and beside each, a year carved in deep scratches, ending with 1991, and as they descended, their footsteps echoed unnaturally loud, like the place remembered them walking before, like it had been waiting for this moment for 32 years. The tunnel opened into a circular chamber glowing with a soft blue light, a luminescent moss climbing the walls in tangled veins, and in the center, a massive stone disc, like a well sealed with glass. And beneath that glass, frozen in a swirling liquid, were the 10 missing students, their faces young, eyes open, not decayed but suspended, mouths slightly open as if mid-sentence. Claire stumbled back. Mason leaned closer, mouthing their names, and then one of the eyes, Daniel's, blinked slow and unnatural, like the start of a program rebooting, and from the chamber wall, a loudspeaker screeched to life, the same voice from the intercom earlier whispering, "Iteration 13 complete. Recalibrating." Claire screamed, grabbed Mason's arm, but the door behind them had shut, moss growing rapidly over it as if sealing their return, and from the center of the disc, a crack splintered outward like glass under pressure. A girl's voice echoed through the chamber, "We see you now," and suddenly, the glass shattered outward, waterless and violent, and the suspended kids tumbled out. But they didn't fall, they floated, hovering mid-air, their faces expressionless, their eyes glowing with blue static. And Mason backed against the wall, yelling for Claire to run, but she couldn't because Grace, Daniel's sister, was among them, and her face turned to Claire with recognition, and she mouthed a silent "Help me." Before her body twitched and convulsed, then she dropped to the ground unconscious, followed by the others one by one, the hum in the chamber going silent, and then alarms began blaring from above, mechanical doors clanging open, and figures in suits and masks stormed in, screaming orders, pinning Claire and Mason down, injecting them with something cold, and everything went dark, and when Claire awoke, she was in a sterile hospital room, for in her arm, TV mounted in the corner playing old school news footage from 1991 about the Pine Trail 10, and when she reached for her bag, it wasn't there, no phone, no recorder, just a note on her nightstand, "They are safe. So are you. You were never here," signed with a logo of a tree inside a triangle, and the door opened. A nurse smiled too brightly and said, "Time for your memory check," but Claire had already slipped the paper into her gown and memorized the coordinates written on the back, because she knew Mason wouldn't give up, and neither would she, especially when she saw the new yearbook just released, 2026 edition, sitting on the desk beside her. And when she opened it, she found her own name listed under class of 1991, and 10 other names below hers, all circled in red, their pictures older, digitally aged, as if they had always graduated, had always returned, and above the page in small faint print, a message glowed only under hospital UV light. Reality holds only what we let them see, and Claire's reflection in the room's glass pane blinked one more time, just slightly out of sync with her own.